All right, welcome. In this explainer, we're going to try and untangle the really complex world of hair disorders. We'll get into why hair grows, why it sometimes decides to fall out, and, what happens when that whole process goes a bit pear-shaped.
Okay, let's kick things off with a number that, well, it might just blow your mind a little. The average human scalp is home to about 100,000 individual hairs. I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. It's a massive number. But here's something that might surprise you even more. Losing between 100 and 150 of those hairs every single day, that's totally normal. Yep, completely healthy. It's all part of your hair's natural life cycle, so it doesn't automatically mean something's wrong. So to really get our heads around all this, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at the secret life of hair. Then we'll dive into what's actually happening when hair loss kicks in, focusing on two big ones, alopecia areata and androgenic alopecia. And to finish up, we'll quickly touch on a couple of other common conditions. Right then, let's jump into our first section. See, every single hair on your head goes through this incredible, continuous three-part cycle. And honestly, understanding this cycle is the key to understanding, well, everything else we're about to talk about. Okay, so it all kicks off with anagen. That's the growing phase, and it can last for years. After that, you've got a really short transition period called catagen. And finally, the hair goes into telogen, which is the resting phase. It just chills out for a few months before it's shed, making way for a new hair to start the whole cycle over again. Now, this chart is really cool because it shows you the balance of it all. At any given moment, the vast majority of your hair, we're talking up to 90%, is actively growing in that anagen phase. It's this healthy balance that keeps a full head of hair. And as you can probably guess, it's when this delicate ratio gets knocked out of whack that problems can start to creep in. So yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. But what happens when that carefully balanced cycle is disrupted? Well, that's when we start talking about hair loss, or to use the proper medical term, alopecia.
Right, so alopecia, it's not just one single thing. It's more of an umbrella term for hair loss. And it's mainly split into two big categories. The difference between them, it's absolutely crucial.
And here's the absolute bottom line. With non-cicatricial alopecia, the hair follicle itself is still there. It's intact, which means there's potential for regrowth. But with cicatricial alopecia, the follicle is actually destroyed and replaced by scar tissue, and that unfortunately means the hair loss is permanent. Okay, let's move on and look at our first specific condition, alopecia areata. This is a classic example of that first category we just mentioned, the non-cicatricial or non-scarring type of hair loss. And this is typically what you see. It's known for the sudden appearance of these very distinct, completely smooth, round, or even oval patches where the hair is just gone. This can happen on the scalp, in a beard, really anywhere on the body. One of the classic signs that doctors look for are these tiny broken hairs right at the edge of the patch. They call them exclamation mark hairs. And while for many people it just stays as a few patches, in some cases it can progress to something much more extensive, like losing all the hair on your scalp, that's alopecia totalis, or even every hair on your entire body, which is called alopecia universalis. So what's behind all this? Well, the best evidence we have right now points to it being an autoimmune condition. What that means, basically, is that the body's own immune system gets confused. It mistakenly starts attacking its own healthy hair follicles, which causes them to shut down and stop producing hair. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the most common form of hair loss in the entire world. It's one that affects millions of both men and women, and it's called androgenic alopecia. You probably know it as pattern baldness. Now, unlike the really sudden start you see with alopecia areata, this type of hair loss is gradual. It's all driven by a combination of two things: a genetic sensitivity that's baked into the hair follicles, and the effect of male hormones, which are called androgens. For men, this shows up in a really recognizable pattern. It usually kicks off with the hairline receding back at the temples, and at the same time, you'll see thinning on the crown of the head, or what's called the vertex. And for women, it's a different story, as this slide shows really well. The pattern here is usually much more spread out, more diffuse. It's a general thinning right across the top of the scalp, but it often leaves the front hairline alone. They sometimes call it the Christmas tree pattern because the area of thinning can look wider at the front and then taper towards the back. But of course, hair disorders aren't only about losing hair. Let's quickly look at a condition that's triggered by stress and another one that's actually about having too much hair.
Right, telogen effluvium. This is a temporary, but let's be honest, often really alarming amount of hair shedding. It happens when a major stress, we're talking anything from surgery to a high fever or even childbirth, gives the body such a shock that it pushes a whole load of hairs from their growing phase straight into the resting phase all at once. And then, on the complete opposite end of the scale, you have hirsutism. This is a condition where women start to grow thick, dark hair in a pattern that we'd normally associate with men, so places like the upper lip, the chin, or the chest. And just like with pattern baldness, this one is also linked to those androgen hormones. So, at the end of the day, what we've seen is that all these very different conditions are just so deeply woven into our core biology, our immune system, our hormones, our genetics. It really leaves us with a final question to think about. As we unlock more and more of these biological secrets, could treating hair loss one day become as predictable as any other science? It's definitely something to think about.